Greetings, all praise I King continuously. Speaking about sources, Babylon claims say is trustworthy, that they have reputable credentials, and they're asking you, what is your source? Where do you get your information? They got these programming channels. You see one now on the YouTube called InfoWars. This is not a coincidence. This is part of the design of the man-off infrastructure. This protects the ruling world classes. Just think about how much different some people's lives are to most people. You'll realize something ain't right. So if you research history, even the man's history, because again, this goes to the source, whereas even if you make reference to a particular publishing, you are giving credit to whoever wrote the article or produced a report. So the trick with the question is one of association, another form of witchcraft, so that once you make a claim and back it with a particular source, you're making that association to whatever it is you're making reference to. For example, if I say, you know, the earth is changing, the temperature is, there's global warming. I said, what's your source? I said, well, I read a New York Times article. Yeah. And even in some circumstances where you're producing information that's valid, yet these communication channels happen to beat you to the chase. You know, you're giving them the power when you make a claim that they already have. Because whereas you're stating it as if it's a revelation, you found this out by observation. You put the pieces together, and so you think that it's credit worthy, that this information should be acknowledged and distributed. Well, someone comes along and says, oh, such and such already said this, so they're not to blame for having made this information available. Yet the question now becomes is, if it was available, why weren't you informed? See, the communication channels have a way of producing the information without really telling pretty much. Anyway, there's the insiders. Those people are already aware, and most of the time they're aware through their own observation. This would be the point, is that the source does not have to come from man. It could come from a greater power, even the king, that you are able to make your own assessment about what it is you see. And no, often man will make this observation less clear. The man comes with facts, and he presents facts on both sides of an issue to blur the line. Now, the tradition of our people is our faith, even given through the Holy Scripture, and in this containing the book of the prophets having foretold of an occurrence and were deemed untrustworthy at that time by those rulers, even of the land of Israel. And therefore they were cast and punished, placed into the dungeon. In modern days, there have been martyrs as well that have spoken of truth. And because of the violence of man that is a part of the world that I people are separate from, even this revealed through many accounts. The first book of John, as well as the Gospel of John. Whereas the world is a product of Satan. And so, how shall we rely on the world to speak truth? Yes, they come with facts, yet they blur the line. And often it's the language that they leave out that's most critical, as well as the language that they introduce. To build these perceptions so that people think they know what they're seeing and hearing. The topics of conversation, sometimes reflecting on individuals as if they're worthy of discussion. These are masks. They're meant to block any discussion of real issues, to keep focus on personalities. Even in the, so-called objective, independent communication channel outlets, does this practice occur? Most times the discussion goes to the so-called leadership, that there's some leaders and there's this structure in place that's going to prevent anarchy. And then when you see like the kind of pornography that's being displayed even to children, because they're going and they are accessing it. Even the man, the Babylon knows of this. Babylon is the head of the beast. wears a false crown, presents itself as authority, and pushes people in that direction to worship and serve at its feet. This is where the power is invested. Today, the youth are being brought into this world to use the internet, the computer, and they're being told that there's material that's not worth listening to. There's even, efforts underway using this artificial intelligence, the AI technology, to discredit much of the material that is disagreeable. It's censorship, and they're going to give people the option. But if you do take this option to listen to the material, you're making a risk in the form where you might have problems with your computer. Maybe you'll be watched as if you ain't already, and perhaps you might even pay more for insurance and this thing. It's a culture. It's a culture that the Babylon seeks to infest, to give it its power, because Babylon sought to reach the heights. Probably couldn't emphasize enough the role that language plays in presenting these sources, because all the information that's produced becomes the source, which really is history. When people look back at history and say, well, what happened during the riots in 1968? They're going to go to the internet and they're going to read what was written about it. Perhaps it was the New York Times, perhaps Wall Street Journal. So that's that publication of man, that source that comes from this hierarchy of power that existed even from the tower. When you're researching topics such as militarization, drones, and how satellites are being used, let's say, to watch people, because what else are they there for? All right, you've got a couple of them watching the climate, for example. Let's get real. So when you do this research and to see what kind of weaponry, how a computer's accessed without being on the internet, even if it's old school, 10 years. For example, you're going to find a blockade. You won't get that information from this internet, which supposedly has all the information. Yeah. Even if it's there, it's buried. So it's the same with the supply chain, with the content on the internet. That the supply chain is controlled by a few hands, these large corporations. Most people can't afford to invest in, and they've already been controlled and owned. The more people try to buy in, stock just goes up. And it's distributing the content that it deems as beneficial to those players. You try to do some research, find out who owns these corporations. Well, you go round and round and round in circles, because you're being blocked from accessing information simply because their structure of rule has permitted them to hide through their lawyers, other companies and trusts, for example. Like, if you want to say, well, let's see if this rumor about the Rothschilds is for real. Well, let's see how much income they have, how much wealth, I should say, they have. How you gonna find out? You won't. You won't. You might not even find a penny. Yeah. There's something wrong. So you, at this point, may come to the conclusion that you must make a determination as to what it is that you are seeing. And because the internet and the magazines and books that weren't helping you with this particular phase in this thing man calls evolution, in this phase in the history of man, you just gotta think. It's not difficult, except when you listen to the Beast Boy. And then you're flooded with so much information. See? If you are someone that thinks that you're going to figure it out by listening to them, sorely